For centuries, the great cathedrals of England have been maintained by master craftsmen, stonemasons, carpenters, and architects. But what if I told you that in 1906, the only person who could save Winchester Cathedral was a deep-sea diver more used to salvaging shipwrecks? Working in complete darkness and wearing a 200-pound diving suit, William Walker spent 6 years of his life beneath one of England's greatest monuments, working entirely by touch as he fought to stop the entire structure from literally sinking. Found in the bustling heart of the city of Winchester, the cathedral has stood as a beacon of architectural magnificence and spiritual importance since its consecration in 1093. These ancient stones have witnessed the sweep of English history, the consolidation of Norman rule, the bloody Wars of the Roses, Henry VIII's religious revolution, Cromwell's Puritan forces, right through to the royal ceremonies of our modern era. Kings and queens have walked these aisles, poets have found inspiration beneath its vaulted ceilings, and Jane Austen lies buried beneath its floor. However, under its Norman tower and within its hallowed halls, a silent crisis was emerging. You see, medieval builders were brilliant in many ways, but perhaps a bit optimistic when it came to foundations. Winchester Cathedral was intelligently constructed on a raft of beech trees over the unstable grounds of a peat bog. It's rather like building your house on a soggy sponge and hoping for the best. Now, this may seem ludicrous by modern standards, but it's not exactly unusual for the era. In fact, this technique was a relatively common solution for building on marshy or unstable ground during the Middle Ages. It served its purpose remarkably well for centuries, even if no one was exactly planning for a 1,000-year lifespan. After all, the medieval mind was more concerned with reaching towards heaven than with what lay beneath their feet. Further complicating matters, the cathedral underwent several significant renovations and expansions over its lifetime. Each generation of clergy seemed determined to leave their mark, and as the cathedral grew, the demands on its precarious foundations increased exponentially. New aisles were added, the nave was extended, and the original wooden ceilings were replaced with stone vaulting, trading lightweight timber for tons of ornately carved stone suspended overhead. But perhaps the most ambitious of projects was the transformation carried out in the late 14th century, which saw the cathedral's nave and transept rebuilt in the High Gothic style. The new design added not only aesthetic grandeur with its soaring arches and delicate tracery, but considerable weight that those waterlogged beech logs were never intended to bear. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the consequences of these additions became alarmingly evident. Cracks began to appear in the stonework, not the gentle, charming marks of old age that give character to our old buildings, but gaping wounds that threatened structural integrity. Sections of the magnificent building showed signs of serious subsidence, with the south and east side sinking at an alarming rate. The ground was literally sinking beneath it, dragging the building down centimetre by centimetre, like a ship being pulled beneath the waves. Walls that had stood straight for centuries began to lean at concerning angles. Archways designed to distribute weight perfectly now strained under asymmetrical forces. The situation reached a critical point in the early 1900s when this beautiful and historically significant building was on the brink of collapse. It was clear that something had to be done, and quickly, to save this cornerstone of English heritage. But what could be done for a massive stone cathedral slowly sinking into a bog? With the cathedral's future hanging in the balance, the church authorities knew they needed the finest minds in Britain to tackle this monumental problem. This wasn't a job for the local builder with a van and a cheery, "I can fix that" attitude. This required genuine engineering brilliance. Enter two men whose names deserve to be far better known: distinguished architect Thomas Jackson and civil engineer of notable repute Francis Fox. These gentlemen would play a pivotal role in the early preservation efforts, beginning in 1905. Jackson was initially brought in as a lead architect, and he ordered large sections of the cathedral to be shored up with timber to prevent further damage while solutions were devised. A fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects with a meticulous eye for detail, Jackson had published several influential works on medieval architecture and was particularly renowned for his sensitive approach to ecclesiastical buildings. His appointment to Winchester Cathedral came after his lauded work on Oxford's venerable colleges and St Albans Abbey, where he had demonstrated both technical prowess and a deep respect for historic fabric. He sought the expertise of Francis Fox when he realised he was out of his depth. The building had developed what sailors might politely call a pronounced list to the southeast, and the alarming cracks marring the cathedral's ancient stonework had grown into gaping fissures large enough for children to climb through. I do have to wonder, how many sent their kids to Sunday school only to have them playing hide and seek inside the actual walls of the building? Now, Fox wasn't just any engineer fancying a crack at fixing a cathedral. He was born into a lineage of engineers, the profession practically coursing through his veins, and was no stranger to ambitious projects, having been involved in the construction of the Mersey Railway Tunnel, the Liverpool Overhead Railway, and parts of Sydney Harbour. After a thorough examination that would put modern building surveys to shame, the diagnosis was grim, but clear. The beech trees that had formed the ancient foundation, which had faithfully supported the cathedral for over 8 centuries, had finally surrendered to the laws of nature and rotted away. Undeterred, and with Jackson overseeing the architectural integrity, Fox proposed a bold engineering plan. First, shoring up the building's exterior. Next came centering the arch vaulting to prevent internal collapse. The strategic insertion of steel tie rods would provide additional support, binding the structure together like modern stitches on an ancient wound. A crucial aspect of his strategy involved injecting liquid cement under compressed air into any accessible voids, starting from the base of the walls, essentially giving the cathedral foundations the early 20th century equivalent of Botox injections. The plan was to replace the rotted wooden foundations with concrete, pinned down to the gravel bed under the peat, creating a new and lasting base for the venerable structure. However, when trenches were dug to reach a gravel bed below the peat, water rushed into the space with the enthusiasm of British tourists heading to a Spanish beach, filling up to a height of 14 feet. The peat had acted as a seal, and breaking it allowed water from the River Itchen to flood the trenches. In early 1906, perhaps growing impatient or believing modern technology could overcome any obstacle, Jackson ordered steam pumps to try and remove the water. This decision came despite protestations from Fox, who realised what might seem a counterintuitive concern. The water pressure was essentially the only thing still holding the cathedral up. Fox understood that the water pressure in the saturated peat was creating a buoyancy effect, partially supporting the massive weight of the cathedral. But Jackson's pumps roared into action, steam billowing around the ancient walls as the machinery of the industrial age attempted to rescue the craftsmanship of the medieval one. But as the water level began to drop, something alarming happened. The cathedral began to sink even faster. The more water they removed, the quicker the building descended into the peat. The pumps were quickly stopped, but the damage had been done. The lesson had been learned the hard way. Fox had been right. The water wasn't just a problem to be eliminated, it was paradoxically part of the delicate balance that had kept the cathedral standing for centuries. It was clear a new plan was needed. The foundations would need to be propped up before the water could be pumped out. In April 1906, as the cathedral's salvation hung in the murky balance, William Walker arrived on site alongside a fellow diver named Rayfield. Their task was as dangerous as it was daring, to go beneath the cathedral and, in the murky depths, manually remove the peaty soil and replace the failing foundations with solid bags of concrete. Now, this endeavour's not just about the physical labour, it was about carefully navigating the ancient building's underbelly, ensuring that each move would avoid further destabilising the structure. Both men were dispatched by Sebe Gorman, the premier diving equipment manufacturers of the day, a company notable for its diving suit development, including that of the standard diving dress, and later the World War II Frogman equipment. These weren't the sleek neoprene wetsuits of today's divers. Picture instead a bulky copper helmet connected by a rubber hose to the surface, and a canvas suit made waterproof by thick, rigid layers of vulcanized rubber. The entire apparatus weighed around 200 pounds. That's the same as a modern refrigerator. I mean, just think of it as wearing a kitchen appliance while trying to perform delicate engineering work. Walker himself was renowned for his underwater work, which ranged from salvage operations to underwater rescue. He wasn't a man given to grand statements or self-promotion. His background was working class, his approach pragmatic rather than philosophical. Yet in accepting this task, he was taking on a responsibility that daunted the most celebrated engineers of the age. With the draining of the water from the trenches proving impossible, the decision to employ a diver to address the cathedral's foundations was a necessity born of desperation. The traditional engineering playbook had been exhausted, each conventional solution crossing itself off the list as quickly as it was proposed. Someone would need to remove the peat topsoil, find and plug the locations where water was gushing through, all while working in the challenging conditions beneath a massive, unstable structure. Other solutions were deemed too risky or impractical, given the delicate state of the waterlogged conditions. Initially, Rayfield and Walker shared the underwater shifts, methodically tackling the sodden foundations in rotation. However, after several months of observing their work, the project directors, Ever mindful of the cathedral's dwindling coffers, and perhaps noticing Walker's exceptional efficiency, made the decision to continue with just one diver. Walker had demonstrated such remarkable skill and dedication that from mid-1907 onward, he became the lone figure descending into the murky depths beneath Winchester Cathedral. For 6 years, William Walker descended below into the muck that had become the cathedral's foundations. Each morning, he would arrive at the cathedral, don his cumbersome diving suit, a process requiring the assistance of several men, and prepare for another day in his underwater office. One can only imagine his thoughts as the heavy copper helmet was lowered over his head, sealing him into his isolated world with the distinctive clink of metal on metal. Working in the cold darkness beneath the monument, his vision was reduced to mere inches in the murky water, when he could see anything at all. Most of the time, Walker had to rely entirely on his touch, his intuition, and his deep knowledge of diving to navigate this underwater labyrinth of peat, chalk, and rotten wood. But working in near complete darkness beneath thousands of tons of stone wasn't Walker's only hazard. The very act of diving itself was fraught with uncertainty and risk. In the early 1900s, medical understanding of diving physiology was limited at best, and divers working long hours underwater, even at relatively shallow depths like those beneath Winchester Cathedral, faced risk of decompression sickness, commonly known as the bends, a horrifying condition where rapid changes in pressure cause nitrogen bubbles to form painfully inside the body, crippling joints or even leading to paralysis and death. Though Walker operated at depths that modern divers might consider modest, every prolonged descent still brought an element of risk, gambling with a condition that was then barely understood. Only a slender lifeline connected him to the surface, an air hose that quite literally meant the difference between life and death. His only communication with the world above came from tugs on a signal rope. Primitive, but effective. 1 tug for all is well, 2 for more air, 3 for pull me up. A simple code that sustained a complex and dangerous operation. The silence of the underwater world would have been profound, broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the distant muffled activities of the world above. Occasionally, I guess he might hear the sonorous ringing of the cathedral bells or the muted voices of the choir during services, a haunting soundtrack to his subterranean labours. And while congregants prayed for divine intervention above, Walker was providing the rather more tangible salvation below. It was a solitary existence, hour after hour of backbreaking work in conditions that would test the resolve of even the most hardened soul. Seriously, the psychological challenge of being isolated in the cold, dark depths cannot be overstated. Modern deep-sea divers, with all of their technological advantages, still struggle with the mental aspects of underwater work. Walker faced these challenges with equipment now only found in a steampunk novel and the stoic determination characteristic of Edwardian workmen. Until late 1911, Walker toiled away, spending up to 6 hours a day underwater. Again, just to put that in perspective, modern recreational divers typically spend no more than an hour beneath the surface, and they're usually looking at pretty fish in crystal clear tropical waters, not laying bricks in a muddy grave pit. During his years beneath the cathedral, he placed an estimated 25,000 bags of concrete, 115,000 concrete blocks, and 900,000 bricks to create a secure foundation for the cathedral. And every bag and block had to be placed by hand in a diving suit designed more for durability than ease of movement. Day after day, month after month, year after year, he worked in his underwater world, gradually replacing the rotten foundations with solid concrete. And as the new foundations solidified and the underpinning work progressed, the alarming cracks in the cathedral's walls began to stabilise. The building that had been sliding towards catastrophe was slowly being pulled back from the brink. After 6 years of painstaking work beneath the cathedral, Walker completed his task in 1911. The concrete underpinnings were in place, the foundations secure, and at last, the water could be safely pumped out without risking the cathedral's collapse. A special service was held within the cathedral in July 1912, led by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Thomas Jackson, Francis Fox, and William Walker all recognised for their respective contributions to saving the ancient structure. Walker stood in the nave that day, not as the anonymous diver working in the darkness below, but as a hero whose hand had literally held up one of England's greatest monuments. Walker's unwavering commitment to this daunting task earned him a rare honour for a working-class man of his era. He was made a member of the Royal Victorian Order by King George V himself. Just imagine the scene. This humble diver, more at home in the depths than in royal company, receiving recognition from the monarch for his extraordinary service. And what makes this royal exchange particularly delightful is the unexpected connection revealed between the monarch and the diver. As the king handed over an ornate silver rose bowl as a gleaming token of gratitude, a flash of recognition crossed the royal countenance. George V suddenly recalled that the humble hero before him had, years earlier, been his diving instructor when the future king was but a naval cadet, learning to navigate the underwater world. Unfortunately, Walker's story, like many tales of quiet heroism, does not have a fairy tale ending. Just a few years after completing his work at Winchester, as the Great War was drawing to a close, another enemy swept across Britain, the influenza of 1918. This devastating illness, which would claim more lives than the war itself, took William Walker at the age of just 49, cutting short a life of remarkable achievement. Having survived years in the perilous depths beneath a cathedral, William succumbed to a virus spreading in the free air. And today, as visitors wander through the magnificent interior of Winchester Cathedral, few realise that they owe their experience to a man who spent 6 years in darkness beneath the floor. Without Walker's efforts, this architectural masterpiece would be nothing more than a footnote in the history books, another medieval treasure lost to time and the elements. The cathedral he saved remains a site of worship, an important venue for cultural events, and a landmark of historical significance, attracting visitors from around the world. Its grand spaces continue to host weddings, funerals, and daily services, just as they have done for nearly a millennium. In the cathedral's south transept, you'll find a small tribute, a bronze bust and a simple inscription commemorating Walker's contribution. His diving mask is also on display. These are a modest memorial for a man who achieved something so significant, but perhaps fitting for someone who did his greatest work unseen and largely unheralded. It's stories like his that motivate me to keep this channel going, to shine a light on the forgotten heroes, the anonymous craftsmen, the dedicated workers who have shaped our heritage in ways both profound and unrecognised. We should remember that history is not merely a parade of the famous and powerful, but a monument built by countless unsung individuals, many of whom left no signature, except in the enduring work they created. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the depths below Winchester Cathedral. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as we continue to uncover more tales of the remarkable individuals who shaped our world in ways both great and small. Until we cross paths again, my friends, goodbye.